Well, John Canzano reported that the Pac-12 10 remaining members have agreed verbally to a grant of rights that they'll sign once the media rights deal is completed. This could mean the deal is imminent. I'm not getting my hopes up.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights-free, still, and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. We're almost to 2,700 on YouTube. We've got hundreds more on podcasts, and I appreciate all of you out there. Lots to get to. Washington State has got a notable agenda item on a board meeting that might be taking place as you listen to or watch this show. And we've got a scheduling thing, and we're going to talk about streaming that we need to discuss later in the show as well. But the first big piece of news that dropped within the last 36 hours is that according to John Canzano, the 10 remaining Pac-12 schools have agreed, not signed, but agreed to a grant of rights. Now, this is not a media deal. A grant of rights is the schools granting authority to the conference to go out and adjudicate where their games will be broadcasted, how and when, and all of that good jazz. Now, the reason that I am not getting my hopes up about this is twofold. Number one, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I have seen comments. Now, this is a more tangible step for sure, but I have seen comments, hints, breadcrumbs, all this sort of stuff too many times end up not leading to a deal eminently getting dropped. I don't know if I used that word correctly, but anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. Imminently getting dropped is what I meant to say. I have seen that before. I have seen direct comments from presidents and athletic directors that the deal will be done soon, that the deal's in its final stages. Is this a more tangible step? Yes, it is. But I'm just saying, as a Pac-12 guy, as the host of this show, and all you everydayers out there probably feel the same exact way that I do. I am not getting out over my skis until I see the actual deal. Is this encouraging? Yes. If this is accurate, the grant of rights ordeal, that would mean no one is jumping ship and that they're going to be committed once the deal gets finalized, and they're just waiting for we don't even know what sorts of details to be ironed out and whatnot, and I'm not going to try and figure out what that could be at this point in time. But the second reason that I am not overly excited, though it has my attention, I am not coming on here and declaring victory over everybody who wants to see the Pac-12 crumble into oblivion and cease to exist. The second reason is Robert Robbins, the president of the University of Arizona, was then on the air, I think with Feinbaum, or he was on a show somewhere, and basically was asked about this report from Canzano, who I tend to trust and who I think has been very good and fair and honest throughout this entire process, and he really has been his entire career. I've read John Canzano stuff for a long, long time, but he said, yeah, I don't really know what that means. I don't know what that is. I don't know about whether or not everything that exists in that report. I haven't been told that everything exists or about everything that report is saying is there. Basically saying, yeah, maybe it hadn't gotten back to him yet, or it hadn't happened, or it was being misreported. I don't know. But once I saw that in conjunction with the past experience I've had, it just led me to the mindset of, okay, let's see what happens today, but let's pump the brakes. Let's everybody pump the brakes, not get out over our skis and, don't fly too close to the sun, Icarus, and every other metaphor and analogy you could come up with as to, what is going down here and why we should just be cautious with that sort of stuff. But a member of the Pac-12 CEO group told John Canzano that over the last few months, we've negotiated all of these issues and the grant of rights is ready to go. That's with regards to advertisements and sponsorships, revenue distribution, whether or not it's even, postseason incentives, everything like that. Reportedly, it's ready to go and everyone just has to sign. And that's the other reason that I'm kind of like, okay, verbally agreeing, saying, yeah, okay, we're in. Yeah, we'll sign that once the deal is done. That's different than actually signing on the dotted line. So until that takes place, I'm also not coming on here to declare victory, which I'm sure people will accuse me of doing anyway, because this is the way that the internet works. But this is an encouraging sign, I'd say, if this is progressing in this solid and concrete of a fashion, because the timeline for San Diego State is kind of approaching quickly. This episode is coming out on the 9th of June. The deadline for San Diego State to avoid doubling or tripling, I've seen it reported both ways, but radically increasing their exit fee from the Mountain West is June 30th. That day is a lot closer than you think. Now, 3 months ago, that didn't seem like it was. That day's never going to happen. We'll never have to worry about that. Here we are. Early part of June, no deal yet. Maybe it's dropped as you're listening to or watching this. I would love for that to be the case, but I am not jumping to that conclusion just yet. But for San Diego State, if that's who the Pac-12 will end up adding, they would take a Pac-12 offer in about a heartbeat if and hopefully when it comes along. I think SMU would do the same. I think those should be the schools that you add. But that deadline is approaching. So I'm encouraged overall, but just not getting too far ahead of myself by this report from Canzano, because to me, that is a tangible step moving in the right direction. And that's what we're looking for at this point in time. We need tangible steps to start getting the ball rolling, to move things along, because we're starting to get down into crunch time. You don't have as much time as you think here. I know June 30th is still a ways away, but everything has to be darn near close to completion at this point on the media rights front if you're going to add San Diego State to your conference, or else they will probably end up in the Big 12, who I do think would take them and would be smart to do so. I think they present a lot of upside on that front. I've talked about them extensively here on the show. Everydayers are very aware of that, but I am in full-fledged support of adding San Diego State and SMU, but we are now in that phase where seeing these sorts of steps should make us go, okay, this is kind of starting to get real, but we don't have that piece of news. This is not that episode quite yet of the show that you're thinking of. The one where I would come on here and actually have a deal to talk about, What are the factors? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? What does it mean? What happens next? And all that sort of stuff. But the grant of rights being agreed upon, according to Canzano and Wilner, that is a significant step. Not signed, is my understanding, but agreed to, meaning that once the media rights deal is done, everyone will sign their grant of rights for the athletics broadcasts over to the Pac-12, and then we will proceed however the Pac-12 deems best, most properly fit. So, news is not breaking yet, but it could. And there is a notable agenda item on a Washington State Board of Directors or Board of Regents, however you want to call a meeting, that might be happening as you listen to this show. Now, as you listen to or watch this show, you should think about the shorts that you're wearing, because it's summertime now. Like, this is officially summertime, which begins formally on June 21st, but I'm in Central Oregon right now. It feels a lot like summertime out there. And Bird Dog shorts are the perfect shorts to wear all summer long. They make you look good. They make you feel good. They give you the sculpted look that you're actually kind of going for especially if you're a weightlifter. These are great for you. They are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look with their Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts. They do the exact same thing as Lululemon Bird Dog shorts, but they fit way better. They look great. They feel great, and their versatility is maybe their best quality. You can wear them on the golf course, hiking, jogging, swimming, hanging out, whatever you want. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Enter promo code LockedOnCollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off this summer, we promise you. So go get your next order, enter that promo code, and get a free Yeti-style tumbler today. All right, we've had our second segment sip, which means we're ready to get rocking and rolling once again. So, Washington State's Board of Regents has a notable agenda item today. And what it says is that Kirk Schultz, the president, will be delegated, or at least the matter would be discussed. So again, something to follow along, but we are not sure what the final conclusion, what the final stage or final takeaway is going to end up being. But the move, if approved by the Board of Regents, would give Washington State President Kirk Schultz the authority to, quote, execute contracts or other agreements related to the university's athletic media rights. This is publicly available on the agenda for Washington State today. This is what they are discussing. Now, does that mean that there's a contract in place ready for them to sign? What Robert Robbins said indicates that that is not the case. However, it could be relating, and I think most likely is, to the grant of rights, and he is being given the authority to go out and sign that to give their grant of rights to the Pac-12 once again. But then the caveat here is Kirk Schultz only needs, and if you really want to read into, little details and whatnot, and what it can mean for when stuff is going to go down and such, the only reason that Schultz has to be delegated authority by the Board of Regents on such matters is if it's pertaining to something greater than $5 million. So anything less than $5 million, he can just sign off. But anything over that, and he has to go through the Board of Regents. Now, not every school operates that way, but Washington State does. So that would indicate if it is pertaining to the media rights. I know we don't expect the Pac-12 payouts per school to be very large compared to the other conferences in the country. However, can we all agree it's going to be greater than $5 million? I'm ready for the troll in the YouTube comments who's going to come in here and say, no, it's going to be $4 million per school. Hopefully you're being sarcastic, because we all know the Pac-12 is not going to be distributing that little. It is not, without USC and UCLA, nearly as valuable as it once was or could have been, but it is not suddenly of equal value to the Mountain West. That is just flat out not the case. And those are the sorts of payouts that go to each school at the G5 level. Is, the Mountain West, or I don't think Conference USA is quite as high, but like the American Conference, they're like in the $5 to $8 million per school per year range. It's why San Diego State and SMU would want to make the jump to Power 5. There's a lot more money there. And as we know, with the LIV Golf and PGA Tour merger that caught me as a golf fan completely blindsided, money is driving everybody's decision here. End of story. That's what it's about. So, assuming the Pac-12 is paying each school more than $5 million a year in whatever media rights deal they end up getting, and Robbins indicated that they hadn't seen a final dollar figure yet, but also was confident that the schools would stay together and they'd be able to get a deal that could keep everybody together. So I feel like that's a reasonable assumption that it'll be over $5 million. So that's the notable agenda item for Washington State that we're all kind of watching today, that again, it is a more substantive step towards, hey, something might soon be materializing. And as I discussed earlier, it needs to. Now, something that's not on that rundown you see there if you're watching on YouTube, before I get to the Washington-Michigan State situation, shall we call it, with that game being moved over to Peacock, there was an update from John Wilner, and he's got a great read. If you want to just go check him out on Twitter, you can find the piece. But for those of you who would like the Cliff Notes version, the Comcast overpayments to the Pac-12 and Larry Scott's befuddling mismanagement of just the entire conference in general seemingly know no bounds, because this story came out a while ago that Comcast had been overpaying the Pac-12 by $5 million a year for 10 years, and that Larry Scott thought that it was the other way around, that they were underpaying them. And so he organized an audit of the situation, which is the only reason Comcast got alerted to it. Maybe they would have figured it out on their own, but Larry Scott aided them in doing that. And so his administration went through the audit, didn't like what they found. Comcast said, wait a minute, we were overpaying. We would like the money back, please. And so the Pac-12 owes Comcast $50 million. That was the report at the time. And those would be made in the form of payments that would not be made. Basically, it'd be kind of like a revenue shortfall of sorts for for each school for that particular fiscal year. So money that they might have expected to come in would then not come in because of overpayments in the past, and it was going to be $50 million over 2 years. Well, it turns out that number, again, Larry Scott's incompetence just keeps getting. He is something else. He is a literal ghost just haunting the conference right now. That is what he is. He is a ghost from Scooby-Doo, except he's real. There's not a masked man under there. He's just there all the time. He's Casper the Ghost, but not so friendly, you know? So apparently, instead of $50 million, it's now going to be $70 million. Now, this equates to, if you're just doing some simple math, a couple $1 million more per school, right? 12 schools, 20 million, about 2 million or so more per school. And the same programs that were being affected more materially by this matter to begin with are now going to be hit even harder, like Washington State, for instance. And it is going to put the Pac-12, from a revenue standpoint, significantly behind the other conferences, which they were already going to be, lagging behind most of them and whatnot when you factor in the total payouts and such. But it's going to further reduce that. It's not going to bankrupt the conference. It's not going to bankrupt the schools. The Washington State is having some real financial issues right now. They put on a hiring freeze. They're cutting down on expenditures and whatnot. But those issues, again, are pronounced at Washington State because they're mostly internal. And this is just kind of making that situation even worse and exacerbating the problem. But this is something that every school is going to have to deal with, because the ghost of Larry Scott just can't go away. It wasn't just $50 million. It had to be up to $70 million. Like, that is just painfully Pac-12 Larry Scott sort of stuff. You can't make it up, and we're not making it up, because this is all very real. So it's not $50 million, it's $70 million. Now, is this increasing the likelihood that one school is going to jump from this conference to the other? No, it is not. Is it a challenge for these athletic departments to manage a budget shortfall of several $1 million? Yes, it is. Is it an insurmountable challenge? No, it is not. Is it something you'd like to be dealing with, or that conferences deal with all the time? Not really, no. You would prefer to have more money than you were expecting to have and get more than you thought you would need. Instead, it's the opposite. We're not bankrupting anybody here, because these are, from a revenue standpoint, every Pac-12 athletic department is bringing in, or gets through fundraising or money from the university and making up with student fees and whatnot. We're in the tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. But for the most Pac-12 schools, you're in the tens of millions of dollars. Depending on who you are, might impact you more or less. But it's not a great thing. It's not the end of the world. And somehow, the unfortunate situation got even worse, because, you know what? Kick us while we're down is the only way that makes any sense whatsoever. I mean, goodness gracious. All right, there's a third segment sip for you. Sometimes you just got to do whatever you got to do to give you the best quality product that I can. All right, let's wrap up with some scheduling talk here. So Washington is going to play a game this year that is entirely streaming. You will not be able to flip through the channels and find Washington playing Michigan State. You will have to be a subscriber to Peacock. Yeah, I know. Kind of surprising, isn't it? And for people who rail against streaming and how involved it will end up being in the next Pac-12 media deal, I would just like to ask you this question. Do the Big Ten and the NFL also not know what they're doing, have gross incompetence and products that nobody wants to watch? Because they are moving the needle on putting things only on streaming. Washington, Michigan State got overpassed by Syracuse and Purdue, by the way, which I don't understand. But they are putting that game. I wonder if it was strategic. I also wonder if there was maybe an alumni of Syracuse or Purdue that was making the decision here. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I'm just spitballing here. That's a lot of what this show is, and I'm glad that you all enjoy it for that. But I also wonder, in a world in which streaming companies appear interested in sports, poised to become more interested in broadcasting live sports, and need content to do so, I wonder if NBC didn't look at that Washington-Michigan State game and say, yeah, that is going to be a more compelling game to watch than Syracuse and Purdue. Yeah, you do have bigger TV draws in Michigan State and Washington than Syracuse and Purdue. Yeah, you do have bigger brands there. So why don't we see what it's like? Why don't we see what happens? What do we see a big bump in subscriptions from the Northwest? Do people get upset? Can they watch the game? Are they going to watch it illegally? Will they not watch it at all? What sort of numbers can we do if we put an actually compelling matchup with a top 10 team on streaming only? But that is going to happen. That is going to happen this fall. Now, this is, if you are upset about it, the fault of the Big Ten, because they have made this decision consciously in conjunction with NBC. I believe, actually, as I say that, NBC is making it more in conjunction with the Big Ten. But remember, for every college football broadcast, or any college sports broadcast, frankly, it is the home school's responsibility to broadcast the game. It is the home school's responsibility. So whatever conference that home school is in, that's the media deal that's now at play. And this is the media deal that's in play for the Big Ten right now, right? Their new deal starts this fall, and NBC is a big part of it. And NBC is saying, we want to put Syracuse and Purdue on cable, and we're going to take Washington, who will probably be a top 10 team, assuming they can take care of Boise State and Tulsa. I think they'll be all right in the first 2 weeks. That's a top 10 program. Michigan State probably won't be ranked this year, but will have a major opportunity to do what Washington did to them a season ago and win a big game at home and turn the tide on your season and turn the narrative around of your program writ large. They're going to have the chance to do that. And NBC is saying, we're putting that game on streaming only. I know everybody's concerned about whether or not if the Pac-12 were to have a super streaming heavy deal with Amazon or Apple or whoever, and Apple is who I've heard a lot more buzz about with regards to the Pac-12 media deal lately. If that is the case, everyone's wondering, well, are people going to watch? Is all this going to happen? It looks like we are headed there towards a streaming heavy world. There's an article out there. You can go and read it. I have on more than one occasion just to, let it seep into my brain and such. About ESPN one day being all streaming. No cable channel for ESPN. It all just being direct to consumer. If that is where the market is going on the media rights front, yeah, there's going to be an adjustment period where you might not have as heavy viewership as you could if you'd been on linear cable at that time. But is it impossible to foresee a world in which big-time live sporting events are on streaming services? The answer is no, because that time is already here. This game is there. The NFL is going to put a playoff game exclusively on Peacock. Do you think that those streaming services, who, by the way, are having to make pivots with their business models because they put out too much content too quickly and there are too many of them and whatnot and people sharing passwords and all this sort of stuff. They need a way to create urgency at their particular streaming service. You don't think that live sports is the best way to do that? It's the last thing that we are all watching at the same time. It is the last thing. Young people don't watch as much cable news. That's still, a big draw for an older crowd, but it's not for younger people. Streaming gets a lot of hate. And people love to come on in the comment section. I'm sure they're already doing so as I'm talking about this. Streaming's a disaster. It's a mess. It's this, that, and the other thing. Well, I see it becoming more and more a part of the sports broadcasting world. So being a part of that doesn't feel like the Pac-12 getting left behind. Now, is this a predictable landscape? No, it is most definitely not. But I think that game being put there is for one of two reasons. Either someone on the inside has a vested interest in putting Syracuse and Purdue on the on NBC, the cable channel, over Washington and Michigan State, or they know that Washington, Michigan State is the better matchup, so they put that on the less accessible part to try to maximize the viewership over there and see what is possible when you have really good teams and really good matchups, intriguing college football playoff ramifications, those sorts of matchups taking place. And then you put a game that people aren't as inclined to watch on the one that's easier to access. I think that dynamic is fascinating. I understand what is going on here, and I am curious to see how this all proceeds going forward. And by the way, for all of you who say, well, you got to be on linear, you can't be on streaming. In the first 3 weeks, the Pac-12 has the lowest percentage of games on streaming for the non-conference matchups, which they primarily are, except for like USC and Stanford and whatnot. For the first 3 weeks, they have the lowest percentage of games streaming in the first 3 weeks. So either the Washington-Michigan State game and the potential of, the Pac-12 deal having a big streaming component going forward is terrible, or this year, at least in the non-conference, they're going to have the greatest media situation broadcasting on big-time channels, which they'll have some great matchups there. Might be diving into that next week, pending what the media rights deal does, that we've ever seen. It's one or the other, but boy, it's fun. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.